Good afternoon, everyone. Can someone respond to me? Can you hear me properly?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Uh, Hope that we have to start from here. Last Saturday, we finished all the elements of legally enforceable contract. Is that correct? All 7 elements we discussed, no?
Sir.
Did we discuss this slide? Not yet.
No, not yet, sir.
Right. Okay. We'll start then. Today, we are going to discuss terms and conditions of a contract. Right. Now, if I brief you or summarize you what we learned yet with regard to the contract, we said the contract. We have in a contract, some contracts are legally enforceable and some contracts are legally not enforceable, right? So how do you decide whether a contract is legally enforceable or not? That you have to decide by analyzing, by understanding whether the 7 elements are there. So in other words, if it is a legally enforceable contract, there are 7 legal elements that you have to fulfill. So if any of those elements not fulfilled, then that contract is not legally enforceable. It is a contract, but it is not legally enforceable. So then when we say legally enforceable, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by legally enforceable? What are you going to enforce in courts in case of default? What do you mean by defaulting a contract or agreement? So that part we are going to discuss today, right? Basically, when we say a party has breached the contract, that means that party has not performed his duty under the contract. As if you remember the first the note, or rather the picture that I gave you, you remember the first step of a contract matter, parties enter into the contract, then parties have to perform the contract. Perform the contract means they have to perform their part of the contract, right? So then breach of contract means if one party breach or fail to perform the duty under the contract is considered as a breach. Now, when we say performing a contract or performing the duties under the contract, those duties are, if it is a written contract, in the contract it is written. If it is a verbal contract, parties verbally agree, right? So those are, we call them clauses or terms and conditions, right? Again, if you have seen a contract, we say bankers, if you have seen a loan agreement or loan contract, right? In that contract that you gave the terms and conditions where the borrower has to follow or fulfill, right? Those terms and conditions, we call them clauses of the contract. But if you take any contract, in any written contract, especially a commercial contract, you can see sometimes sometimes 100 or more terms, or rather the clauses are there. So some clauses are called terms and some are considered as a conditions, terms and conditions, and some are considered as a warranties. So there are differences between these clauses, terms, conditions, warranties, these things that we are going to discuss today and are going to identify what actually we mean by these terms and conditions, right? Then as I told you, in a agreement, in a contract, that you can see clauses, terms, written terms in the agreement. So we can classify those terms into two mainly. The first one is express terms. Express term. In Sinhala we call it prakashita, express. So terms specifically agreed between the parties, whether in writing or verbally. So when you are entering into a contract, we say we forget about a multi-party contract. We take two-party contract, right? Two-party contract. One in a contract like that, we have offeror and offeree. So person makes offer, the other person accepts it, right? Then they fulfill the other elements and they create a contract. When they are entering into the contract, in most occasions they expressly agree to the terms, right? They say you have to follow, you have to obey by these conditions. The other party say yes, I agree. Likewise, they expressly agree. If it is a written contract, it is written, right? If it is a verbal contract, they expressly mention that and agree. So therefore, those are called express terms. Express terms. Then these express terms, again, we can divide into two, that is fundamental terms and collateral or ancillary terms. Fundamental terms means those are which the whole basis of the contract. Now, in an express terms and conditions in a contract, all the terms and conditions are not equally important, right? Equally important. If you take a contract or lease agreement, you take a loan agreement or whatever, right? A commercial contract, you can see sometimes hundreds of clauses are there. But all these hundreds of clauses are not equally have equal value. So some contracts, some terms or some clauses are very important in a contract. Very important in the sense that goes to the root of the contract. All right, the contract is based on that particular term. For example, we'll take a simple example. One party offer to sell a vehicle, the other party agreed to purchase. Simple sales and purchase agreement, right? So then with this party who's offering and the party who accepting has to describe the vehicle. So they say this we are going to sell, party A going to sell a Toyota Corolla vehicle, and the description is given. Then the other party accepting, right? As a first condition. And the second condition says the value or the purchase price of the vehicle is 5 million. So now you see these two conditions or rather terms of this agreement are very important, crucial, and it goes to the root of the contract. Now, for example, if you enter into a contract to purchase a vehicle, and if you have not mentioned the vehicle or described the vehicle, or if you have not mentioned or if you have not written the value of the vehicle that you are going to purchase, if those two are not there, actually the contract has no meaning. It has no meaning. So if it is breached, then if you go to court, then court will ask, what is this agreement? What is the vehicle that you agreed to purchase, and what is the purchase price? It is not mentioned in the contract. So therefore, such a clause goes to the root of the contract, and the contract is based on that clauses or terms. So those terms are recognized or categorized as fundamental terms of the contract. fundamental terms, right? Then the other terms is collateral or ancillary terms. So that means those which support the fundamental terms. That is not very important term in the contract, but it support the fundamental term. Fundamental term. For example, we say fundamental term says that A is selling a vehicle, a Toyota Corolla car, for 5 million rupees. That is a fundamental term of the contract. Then the second clause says the vehicle is blue color. Just an example, right? So that support the first one. So to describe the vehicle more. So therefore, it's not a fundamental term. So blue color, it's not a fundamental term. If you want, you can change the color of the vehicle also, right? You can paint it in red color. So just because that you have changed the color, that will not affect the validity of the contract. Still the same vehicle, Toyota Corolla, and the engine number, chassis number, everything is there. So the same vehicle, only the color change. The second clause support the first clause, but it is not a fundamental term or clause in the contract. So just because the clause, the collateral or ancillary term is breached, the contract won't nullify. So contract exists. Right? But if it is a fundamental term breach, that means the contract you can't exist, contract comes to end. So that is the difference between fundamental term and a collateral term. Then the next category of term is implied terms. Express term and implied term. Implied term means the terms which have been omitted from the specific agreement but need to be put into the contract in order to it makes sense, right? So sometimes what happens when we are entering into a contract by an oversight or whatever the reason, maybe negligence, sometimes we miss certain things. However, unless you include that miss part or omitted part to the contract has no meaning. So therefore, even though that is not expressly included to the contract, some terms or some conditions or some clauses can apply to the contract. So those clauses or terms are called implied terms. That is not in the contract, but it is essential to the contract. But parties they have omitted, they have not included that to the contract. But without that the condition or term, the contract has no meaning. So therefore, the parties apply that terms into the contract, even though that is not in the contract in writing, right? So that type of term is called implied terms. So if I brief this, the terms that we can divide into two, that is express terms and implied terms. Express terms is parties agree at the time of expressly agree at the time of entering into the contract. Implied terms means parties they have missed it, they have omitted it, but it applies, otherwise the contract has no meaning. Then again we can divide express terms into two, that is fundamental term and collateral or ancillary term. Fundamental terms means it goes to the root of the contract. The contract is based on the fundamental term. If fundamental term is not there, the contract is not, it has no value. So ancillary or collateral term means that is not important as fundamental term, but it support the fundamental term. So if it is breached, if a collateral or ancillary term is breached, still the contract is valid. That will not affect the validity of the contract. So if you have any questions from here, you can ask from classification of terms. Okay, then we'll go to the next one, implied terms. Implied terms, how can an implied term apply to a contract? Now we say the implied terms means that is a term has been omitted, has not included into the contract by whatever the reason, maybe a omission, mistake, or maybe a negligence, whatever, it has not included. If it is an included term, then it is yes. Yes, please.
Can you give an example for the implied terms?
Implied terms. Okay, right. I will give a simple example, right? We say, right. Okay. We'll say like this, right? Now, parties. We take the same example that we agreed. We discussed. That is, A agreed to sell his vehicle. He has a Toyota Corolla vehicle, right? It has. It is, we say, blue color, right? So they have agreed and they have written in the agreement. But A is selling his Toyota Corolla car, and the price is 5 million, and so on, right? So then we say in this agreement they have not mentioned, right? We say there is a lease agreement also. There is a lease. He has taken a lease. Now, you know, when you are selling a vehicle, first you have to settle the lease, and then only that the purchaser can purchase. However, the parties, when they enter into this lease, rather sales agreement, sales and purchase agreement, they have missed or they have omitted to include the term about the settling of lease, right? So now what happened? Now all other terms and conditions they have agreed, price, the vehicle, everything, they have the description of the vehicle, time period, everything they have agreed, but they have omitted the fact that the seller has to first settle the lease of the lease company before he is selling the vehicle. That part has missed by both parties, right? Now to perform this sales agreement, this omitted term, they have to apply, right? They have to apply. So the seller can say, yes, we have omitted this, we have missed this, but unless you settle the lease, that we can't go ahead with the sales agreement. I can't purchase because the ownership is with the finance company. Therefore, that settling of the lease before sale should apply to the agreement as an implied term. Though they have not discussed, though they have not included that, it will be a part of the contract. Is that clear? Are you clear with the example? Okay, I believe that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you. So then we'll say implied terms. I said implied terms can apply in several ways, right? Implied terms can be applied in several ways. The first one, implied term to a contract can apply by custom, charitra, customs, right? How can implied term apply by custom? Custom is a particular trade, custom in a particular trade. It will be implied into the contract in respect of that trade. The same applies to the customs in a particular district or place. Now, this is very important. In the society, we have ethnic groups or people, right? They have their own customs, their behaviors, right? As I told you before, right? The Tesavalami, the Tamil, Jaffna Tamils, they have their customs, which is a part of their law. That is Tesavalami law. In the district of Jaffna, they have certain practices. So those practices apply to legal transactions also. Now, for example, if they are selling a property, first they have to offer to the neighbor. There is a tradition like that or custom like that. So therefore, if they enter into a contract to sell a land in Jaffna area, so that custom will automatically apply to that agreement, right? It is not mentioned. So therefore, if it is not mentioned, that term is not mentioned, that is not an express term. Then that custom will apply as a implied term, right? That is by custom. And then in particular trades or particular sometimes professions, they have their practices also. Now, for example, fishermen, they have their habits, right? Their customs. Then the people who in agriculture field, they have their habits, their customs. Likewise, different trades, different professions, they have their customs also. So if they enter into a contract, even though that custom is not mentioned in the agreement, that term, that custom will apply to the contract as a implied term. That is number one. Number two, by statute. How can implied term can apply by the effect of a statute? It is like this. In the absence of specific agreement, terms will automatically be implied into the contract dealings with subject matter of the statute. That means if parties, they have not specifically agreed to the terms and conditions, then what will happen? The terms and conditions mentioned in the statute will automatically apply. For example, sales of goods acts. Now, when you go to a shop, when you purchase something from a supermarket or pharmacy or wherever, you don't sign a contract, right? Parties, you don't discuss terms and conditions. Have you ever go to a supermarket and to purchase something? We say a packet of milk powder. So do you discuss the terms and conditions with the supermarket owners or manager? Basically, we don't, right? We don't discuss. We just go, we pay, we take the goods and we pay the money and we get a receipt and come. So now no terms and conditions agreed or discussed. However, in a situation like that, what happened? The terms and conditions mentioned in the sales of goods ordinance or act will apply to that contract. Now, sales and goods ordinance or act says every purchase, sales and purchase of goods will covered under that particular act. That is a statute, will apply to a transaction. So in a situation like that, what will happen? Even though parties, they have not agreed terms, statute will apply. Statute will apply as an implied term. Then supply of goods, again supply of goods, also another act that apply when you are supplying goods. And supply of goods and services act. Likewise, different trades, different professions are governed by different acts or statutes. So terms and conditions or the legal principles mentioned in this act will apply as a statute. Then by course of previous dealing, so this is another thing that we have to remember. In implied terms apply to a contract as a result of by previous dealing. That means we say A and B of a contract, they are dealing for a long period of time. Right? We say one party is supplying goods, the other party purchasing goods and services from A and B. A is providing a service and B is getting his service for a period of time. Right? So every time that A provides a service, B and A enter into a contract. Right? Long period, now they have dealt. So over years, now they have dealt. But in one occasion, we say in the present occasion, some conditions that we have followed in previous agreement have not included to the present contract by whatever the reason. Right? We say in the previous year agreement we have mentioned the last previous agreement. We have mentioned A and B, both parties has the discretion to terminate the contract after giving 1 month notice. Right? Now, in this year, we say 2021, when we entering into the contract, whatever the reason, maybe a negligence or whatever, we have omitted that clause. So now what is the situation? Today, the 2021 contract doesn't say that party can terminate the contract early. So that means if you enter into the contract, unless until the full term expire, no party can terminate the contract. So in a situation like that, even though that clause is not mentioned in the present contract, right, by dealing of the parties before the previous dealings of the parties, that term, that is the agreement can terminate after giving 1 month period, that specific clause can be considered as a part of the present contract as well as an implied terms. Right? Those any questions from here? Implied terms, how an implied term apply to a contract, that is by custom, by operation of a statute, or by operation of previous dealings. Right? These are the methods that implied term can apply to a contract. So any questions from here? Okay, if you don't have a question, then I'll go to the next one. That is conditions and warranties. Conditions and warranties. What is this? Condition and warranties. Now I told you in a contract, if you see a contract, we have a lot of clauses in a contract. Right? Lot of clauses. Right? Those clauses, we call them representations. Representations. These are the statement of facts made by one or more parties to the agreement. Statement of law or opinions are not representation. Now, when we are entering into a contract, before we entering into a contract, we negotiate. Right? Before we enter into the contract, we negotiate. We offeror and the offeree, they negotiate the price, they negotiate the quality of the goods or whatever, right? Before they formalize the contract or before they enter into the contract, both parties or all the parties negotiate. When we are negotiating, when the parties are negotiating, they exchange information. They exchange information. So parties make statement to the other parties. Now, for example, if I get a simple example, we say A and B going to enter into a contract. Now they are to sell a vehicle, right? You may have experienced this sometimes, right? So when we are entering into, when we want to purchase a vehicle, we discuss certain things. with the seller and the buyer, purchaser and the buyer. They discuss certain things. When we are discussing, parties, they represent certain things. So seller says this vehicle is manufactured in 2013. I am using this vehicle now more than 5 years. It's a good vehicle. It does 15 kilometers per liter. Right? Likewise, he made some statements now. Statements of facts. Statements of facts. He said this vehicle is manufactured in 2013. That is a statement. A statement of facts. Fact is that the vehicle is manufactured in 2013. And further he says, I am using this vehicle for 5 years. Right? So that means that he says that last 5 years I own the vehicle, nobody else. So that is again a statement made by the seller. So the fact is he has used the vehicle for 5 years. Likewise, that party making statement. The seller, rather the purchaser, also making statement. He says, I am a bank manager. Right? I want a vehicle for my private use. Right? So like I have cash in my hand. Right? To purchase. This is a cash purchase. Likewise, he is making statements. So now the the seller and the purchaser both make statements of facts. Those statements of facts are called representation. In law, the law word that we use for these facts, the statements of fact, representations. So genuine representations are there, but some are not genuine. So when we are making representations, people make false representations also. So false representations are called misrepresentations. Now, for example, we say now A said this vehicle has been manufactured, this vehicle has been manufactured in 2013. So that is a statement or statement of fact made by the seller. But actually, we say it has been the vehicle has manufactured in year 2012. So then the statement made by the seller is not correct. So such a statement is called misrepresentation. So it's not just representation, the fact is wrong, so therefore it is a misrepresentation. Right? Representation is that. Now, again, when we are making statements or when we are exchanging facts, all the facts that we exchange are not again equally important to the parties of the contract. Right? Now, when we are making statements, some statements that we made are very important. Some are not. Now, for example, in that the conversation, the one party said, A said that I am using this vehicle for last 5 years, and he said I am a doctor, right? The other party say that I am a bank manager. So likewise, they exchange personal information also. Now, that fact, whether he is a doctor, the seller is a doctor, and the purchaser is a manager of a bank, whether it has value as that he said, the first one, that the car was manufactured in 2013. So you see, the car was manufactured in 2013. That representation is very important to this particular contract. So therefore, right, that important term or representation is a primary important to the agreement. So therefore we call them, it's a condition. It's a condition. So conditions are terms of agreement which are primary importance to the contract. So if it is a breach, if it is breach, what will happen? That if the contract, if a condition of the contract is breached, then the contract injured party, that means the innocent party, can rescind the contract. So that means that he can terminate the contract and he can get other remedies under that. So breach of condition can be considered as a breach of contract. Then the other representation is warranties. Warranty is a less important term of the contract. Now we said that there are representations, the terms, certain representations are very important, primary important to the contract, right? Then the other terms or other statements, representation made by parties, they are important, but they are not that important, that it has not that high value like condition. So those less important representations are called warranties, right? Warranties. So the warranty, if the warranty is breached, then you can't terminate the contract. You can't finish the contract. So what you can do, the innocent party can ask damages only for the breach of warranty, right? If I summarize this, parties, when they enter into a contract, they exchange facts. Those facts are called representations. Then the representations of the parties can be divided into two based on the importance of the representation. If it is a primary important representation, that is called condition. It is a condition of the contract. If it is not such important statement made by a party of a contract, that is categorized as a warranty. If a condition is breached, then the innocent party can consider that as a breach of the contract. If the condition is breached, the innocent party can consider that as a breach of the contract, right? Then the remedy available, that innocent party can terminate the contract and get remedies. If it is a warranty, then if the warranty is breached, the innocent party can't terminate the contract. So what he can do, he can ask damages only for the loss that he occurs. Now, if I explain this with an example, we say, now we take the same example. A offered to sell his vehicle. He says it's a Toyota Corolla vehicle manufactured in 2015, so 2013, and the price is 5 million. Then the other party and also says that this vehicle has been used by me only, no one else used, only by me, right? Then he says further certain things. So those are the facts that they exchange, the statements of facts, right? Now the other party accept and they enter into a contract. Now the vehicle it's a Toyota Corolla vehicle and it has been manufactured in 2013, and other things that they have agreed are there. So we say, now after purchasing the vehicle, the purchaser, that he found out that the vehicle is manufactured actually not in 2013 but in 2010, 3 years before. Now the seller has breached a term or rather representation in the agreement or contract. The question is whether this term, whether it's a primary important term or whether it's a less important term. Now, when we consider this transaction, selling and purchasing of a vehicle, the year of manufacture of the vehicle is very important. So because the value of the vehicle, market price of the vehicle will depend it based on the year of manufacture. So now the seller has misrepresented the fact that it has been manufactured in 2010, but he has misrepresented as manufactured in 2013. Now clearly there is a breach. Now we have to now think whether it's a breach of condition or whether it's a breach of warranty. Now, depending on the nature of this transaction, we see this is a primary important representation made by the parties. So therefore, it should be a condition of the contract. If it is a condition of the contract, if it is breached, then the innocent party can rescind the contract or terminate the contract. Terminate the contract means that the buyer can say, look here, you said me this is manufactured in 2013. Now I found that it is not 2013, it's 2010. So you have breached a condition of the contract. So therefore I don't want the contract, or I don't want to go ahead with the contract. I terminate the contract, I return the vehicle, give me my money. So that's because it is a condition, right? We take the other statement that the seller made. He said, I own this vehicle for last 5 years and only me use the vehicle, nobody else, right? Nobody else. Now, the fact is it is a Toyota Corolla vehicle, that is correct. It is manufactured in 2013, that is also correct. And the vehicle is worth 5 million, that is also correct. Last 5 years that he has used the vehicle, that is also correct. But then by the seller, he found out that actually this vehicle has not used only by the seller, but oftenly his wife also has used the vehicle. Now that is a breach. Now there is a statement. What is the statement? Statement says only me use the vehicle, nobody else. That is a statement, right? That's a statement of fact. Now what is the situation? Situation is now actually it is not used by him only, that his wife also has occasionally used the vehicle. So therefore it's a misrepresentation. The statement is wrong. Then the question is, if the statement is wrong, that is a misrepresentation, whether the buyer can terminate the contract and return the vehicle. So when you looked at this transaction, you see this statement made by the seller is not that primary important. Whether it's used by the seller or whether it's used by his wife occasionally is not a primary important point or primary important clause in the contract. So therefore, it is not a condition, it is a warranty. It's a warranty. If it is a warranty, right, you can't terminate the contract. Only thing that you can do is you can ask damages for the misrepresentation or for the real loss. So if you have lost, if you have made any loss because of the vehicle being used by his wife, then that loss you can claim from the seller. That's all. So you see now when you are getting when you are purchasing certain, especially the electronic items and phones or computers, laptops, we get a warranty card, right? So warranty cards means, right, it gives a warranty. It says that in case of these things happen, that you can do this thing. Unless specifically says that you can return the good, right? The warranty card only says that we will rectify the whatever there. So that means that you can't terminate and return the goods. So that you have to remember. So that is how we classify the representations of an agreement or terms of the agreement. We can classify that as a condition and warranty based on the importance of the term or representation to the contract. If it is a primary important, that is a warranty. So rather condition. If it is not primary important, that is a warranty. So any questions up to now from here? Conditions and warranties. Are you clear? Everyone? Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
The statements of law is not come under the representations.
Can you repeat the question again? If
why the statement of law is come under the representation?
Okay. Statement of law or opinion are not representation. Very good, right? So only the statement of facts can be considered as a representation, right? Now, statement of law means it's again an opinion about the law, right? Or opinion, right? Like we say, we will take an example. We say, when say I am the seller, right? I am the seller, and I say my opinion is this vehicle is a very good vehicle. Or we say, my opinion is this vehicle is that manufactured in 2013 December, right? Now it is not a clear statement. It's not a clear representation because I am providing an opinion, my personal opinion that I am providing. So if I provide an opinion, the purchaser, the other party, has a discretion to accept my opinion or reject it. You are not bound to accept my opinions, right? So therefore, you can't, the seller can't say that you said this, then I believed it, because the statement itself says, this is my opinion. This is my opinion. Sometimes you go to a doctor, the doctor gives medical opinions. Medical opinions means you are not bound to follow it. If you wish, you can follow, or otherwise you can just forget about the opinion. You go to a lawyer, he gives legal opinion. He says, if you do this, this thing could happen. So you are not bound to follow that. You can get an opinion, but you can forget about the opinion and you do whatever you want. So likewise, the opinions means that a personal view that we provide to the other party is not bound to follow it. But statements are not like that. Statement means that I am surely say certain thing. I say this vehicle is manufactured in 2013. So then, as a statement or as a statement of facts, if I represent it to the other party believes it. So that's the difference. The statement of law also is the same. For example, I can say, sometimes there are rules and regulations passed by the government. You may have heard about this. There is something called luxury tax, right? If the engine capacity is higher than certain value, I think it's 2,500 maybe, right? I'm not sure, but if it is the engine capacity is 2,500 cc, then the purchaser has to pay a tax, or the user has to pay a tax. That is called I don't know. There's a tax like that, right? That's called luxury tax. Luxury tax. You have to pay a luxury tax. Right? We say this vehicle is, we say 2013 490, and the seller says the luxury tax is not applicable. So now this is a statement of law. This is a statement of law. So buyer can't accept that statement of law as a representation. So it is the buyer's duty to check whether actually the law that he mentioned, the statement of law that he mentioned, whether it's correct. So you can't say that it is a representation, so I believe that as correct. So it is the duty of the buyer to check the correct law and follow the correct law. So that is why we say a statement of law or opinion are not considered as a representations. So representation means the statements of facts made by one party to the other party at the time of entering into the contract. Statement of facts. Clear?
Yes, sir.
So any other questions? Okay, if you don't have questions, then we'll go to the next slide. Now, we discuss the contract, how to create a contract, the terms, the elements of the contract. Then we discuss terms. Then we discuss conditions and warranties. Now we are going to discuss discharge of a contract. Discharge of a contract. Discharge of contract. What do you mean by discharge of contract? Discharge means the contract comes to end. Not contract terminate. Contract comes to end. Now parties enter into a contract. Right? When the parties enter into the contract, the parties, they have to perform the duties under the contract. Perform the duty under the contract. So this contract comes to end after discharging or after completing the performance of the duty on the parties. So some contracts, you remember, some contracts are continuous contract. Continuous contract. There is no end. Right now, for example, we say we'll take one contract, sales and purchase contract. Right? Sales and purchase contract. So we say you are buying a vehicle, right? Then you enter into a contract. So you pay the money, they give the vehicle, you sign papers, right? Then you get the vehicle and register at the RMB. So contract is over. Contract is over thereafter. It is not a continuous contract. So parties, they have performed their duty, they are part of the duty, and after finish the obligation, or after providing the service or the duty, the contract comes to end. So thereafter, the contract is, we consider the contract is discharged. The duty or the obligation of the parties now over. It's not a continuous one. But there are some contracts, those are continuous contract. Continuous contract. For example, we take the marriage, right? When you enter into the marriage, that is a contract. The both parties, a husband and wife, they have duties. So until the marriage is over, the parties, both parties, they have to perform their duties. So perform their duties. If one party failed to perform the duty, then it is considered as a breach of marriage contract. So therefore, unless you can't say that marriage contract is over on the wedding day. No, it is not like that. You sign papers, you register the papers, but the contract is not comes to end or discharge. It will be a continuous contract unless and until the contract terminated. It continues. So likewise, we have certain contracts. One-off contract, you sign the contract, you perform the particular duty. After performing that duty, contracts comes to it. Then other type of contract is continuous contract. You enter into the contract, right? Then you have to perform the contract continuously until the contract ends. So the parties has to discharge their duty continuously, right? So then after performing the duty of the contract in other words, if all the obligations of the parties of the contract is over, we call that contract is discharged, right? Now after selling the vehicle, after registering the vehicle into the other person's name, purchaser's name, that contract is discharged because the obligation of the seller and the purchaser is over, right? Now we'll see what are the methods that that a contract comes or can be considered as a discharge. Number one, by performance. If it is a one-off contract, after performing the duties of the parties, the contract comes to end. Example, supply of goods. Same example we can take, right? You agree to purchase a vehicle and you pay the value. Other party supply the good, then the contract is over. Contract is performed. There is nothing to perform more. So that is by performance, the contract can be discharged. Then by expiration. The expiration means if the contract is entered for a period of time, at the end of the period, contract automatically get discharged. Now, for example, we take a lease facility, or rather we say a lease or lease of a property, house, right? When we are leasing a property, parties sign a lease agreement. So lease agreement say this house A provide to B on lease for a period of 1 year, right? Once the time period is over, we say 31st of December 2021. So next day, that is 1st of January 2022, lease agreement comes to end. So then by expiration of the time period, the contract comes to end. So that is number two. Then by agreement of the parties. By agreement of the parties means, right? If the contract is agreed for a period of time, we take the same example, lease agreement. Our parties have entered into a contract for 1 year. 1 year, right? But by agreement of the both parties, they can terminate the contract before. That means after 6 months, the parties, two parties, they agree. They say, okay, right, we don't want to go for 1 year. We will terminate the agreement early. So 6 months, within 6 months, we terminate. So that is a termination by consent. So therefore, the third method of a contract can be discharged by agreement of the parties, termination by consent. So after termination, the contract, no obligation on the contract on the other party. So they don't have to perform anymore. So example, early termination of a lease agreement. Then the fourth one, by operation of law. By operation of law means parties enter into a contract, right? All of suddenly we say a new law pass. After, because of the new law, this contract is now cannot be performed. So in a situation like that, or situation can be changed. Status of a party can change by operation of law. So in a situation like that, this contract you can't perform further. So in a situation like that, by operation of law, contract comes to end. Example, if a party is declared as insolvent of bankrupt or wound up, then by operation of law, agreement comes to end. Example, I'll give a simple example. We say A and B enter into a contract. We say A is a company. A is a company. Now, after entering into the lease agreement, we say A is the lessee, the person who takes the lease. B is the landlord. Now, after entering into the lease, lease agreement entered for a 2 years period. Now, after entering into the lease agreement, this company was wound up. That means that they can't do business, so therefore they closed down their business legally. Right? There's a procedure, so they have to follow the procedure. They have filed action to wound up the business. So okay, there is they have filed a winding up case, and the court orders to close the business by winding up. So now court order given. Now the business is wound up. The company is wound up. Wound up means that there's no the company. There's no company now. Now what is the situation? What will happen to the lease agreement? So lease agreement now automatically become discharge or cancel or terminate, because by operation of law, one party's status has changed. So that party is no more. So therefore, the contract comes to end. So any questions of discharge of contract? So these are the methods that we can terminate, or rather a contract can be discharged. So if you don't have questions, then I'll go to the next one. The breach of contract. Breach of contract. Breach of contract, what does it mean? Right? Basically, as I told you, when the parties enter into the contract, they have to perform the contract duties under the contract. Both parties, they have to perform the contract. So as I told you, some contracts, it's only one-off contract, one duty to perform, and after finishing that particular transaction or particular work, the contract comes to it. Right? There are contracts that continuously that you have to perform your duties under the contract. We see one party, that we take a simple contract, two-party contract, right? A and B. Now they enter into a contract. They enter into a contract, A and B, they sign a contract. The contract is about supply of goods. So A agreed to supply, we say 25,000 kilos of sugar to B monthly for a period of 1 year. So now this is the agreement, and B agreed to pay we say 110 rupees per kilo. So this simple agreement, we take a simple agreement, right? Now A has provided 25,000 kilos of sugar in January. So as per the agreement, now B has to pay 100 rupees, 110 rupees per kilo within the month of January. Now, after receiving the goods, B failed to pay the value. So now what happened? A has performed his duty, B has failed. So that means B has breached the contract. B breached a fundamental term of the contract. Payment of money or the value of the good that he purchased is a fundamental term, fundamental representation. It is a condition. So now condition has breached by the other party, B. So now B is the wrong person, wrongdoer. A is the person who has performed the contract, who is the innocent party who lost the value of the goods. Now who has breached the contract? The contract has breached by B. By B. Then A is the innocent party. A has a right to get remedies from B, the person who did the wrong. So the A can sue B and ask remedies from courts. So what are the remedies available in a breach of contract matter. So that's what we are going to discuss now. So in a breach of contract, the remedies available for the innocent party are these. One, damages for the breach of contract. So when a contract is breached, the innocent party can ask damages from the other side. That is the wrongdoer. So damages are the intended or compensate the injured, intended to the compensate the injured party for the loss that he has suffered as a result of breach of contract by the other party. Now damages means as a result of this breach of the other party, if any loss had occurred to the innocent party, that loss can be recovered from the wrong person, the person who breached the contract. Right? We take a simple example, the same example. We say now this person, he agreed to provide 25,000 kilos of sugar every month for the other party. Right? Now they entered into agreement. They said they have the agreement is valid for 1 year. The first installment, first sugar installment that gave to the B by A. Now A has, we say A has imported this sugar from, we say, Brazil on a credit basis that he has obtained, or rather he has paid the exporter by obtaining a bank loan. Now what has happened? A entered into a contract with B to supply 25,000 kilos of sugar. A obtained a loan from a bank to import sugar from another country. Now A brought or import the sugar and gave to B. B failed to pay A. Now there is a loss to this person. There's a loss. There is a loss. So this loss can be recovered as a damage from the other party, as a damage from the other party. We were discussing this. So the remedies available, the first remedy available is the damages. We can ask damages for breach of contract. Then the second remedy available is specific performance. Specific performance. Specific performance means the innocent party that can go to courts and can ask a direction or order from the courts to direct the other party, the person who default the contract, to perform the contract. This type of direction is called specific performance. Now, for example, we say we'll get an example like this. We say A and B enter into a contract, right? A enter into a contract with B to construct a house at A's land. So the B is the contractor, A is the landowner. They enter into, they have a contract. Now, as per the contract, B has to perform, B has to build up a house in the land of the Mr. A. So as per the contract, A has to pay the money to B for the value, for the work he does. So now this contract is there. Now, as per the contract, the building has to finish. The building has to complete by 31st of, we say, December 2020. Now, A paid all the money that due to B, but B failed to finish the house as agreed by 31st of December 2020. We said even today he has not completed the house. Now, in a situation like that, what A can do, the innocent party, A can go to courts and file action against B on breach of contract, and can ask certain things. First, he can ask damages, actual damage or loss occurred to him. Not only that, he can ask for specific performance also. If that specific performance clause is in the contract, that he can ask that remedy. What is the remedy? That court will direct or issue an order to the B, that is the contractor, to finish the contract or finish the building as agreed. That is called specific performance option or remedy. Then the other remedy available is injunction order. Injunction order means that when a contract is going to breach, when it is close to breach, then the innocent party can go to courts and get an order from the courts restraining the wrong party from breaching the contract, breaching the contract. So you see, the enjoining orders we take before the contract is breached, but when he is going to breach, right? We say we will say like this, right? We say A and B entered into a contract to sell and purchase a vehicle or land, right? And A paid an advance also to B. Now B, within 1 month's time, B has to sell the property to A. So A has to obtain a loan, B agreed, and they agreed within 1 month's time to complete the contract, sign the deeds and complete the contract. Now, now we say now A paid an advance to B, and now A is trying to get a bank loan. So after entering into the contract, we say Mr. B, the seller now is trying to sell the property to a third party, somebody else. So now he is going to breach the contract. It's not breached yet. He's looking for a person. Now he's negotiating with another person. We say C, right? He's now trying to sell the property to C. So in a situation like that, the contract is not breached yet. So therefore, you can't ask damages or you can't ask specific performance because it is not breached. So in a situation like that, what Mr. A can do, he can go to courts and get an enjoining order to prevent B, the other party, from breaching the contract. That means that the court will issue an order preventing B or prohibiting B selling the property to C. So that type of order is called injunction. I have given here a case, Warner Brothers versus Nelson. In this matter, there was a actress called Betty Davis. She had a contract with this film company as an actress for 1 year. In the breach of the contract, she accepted a role in another film studio. So what happened? This lady is an actress, had a contract with Warner Brothers Film Corporation. So then while the contract is there, as per the contract, this lady, the actress, can't take part in any other performance or for any other company. So while the agreement is there, what she did, she tried to do a character in a different film company. So then Warner Brothers went to court, and Warner Brothers sued and asked for an injunction preventing her working for the other studio. So then the court granted the relief and prevented the actress from performing in other studios. That is what happened in Warner Brothers versus Nelson. So That is those are the remedies available when the contract is breached. So any questions from this? Any questions? Okay, if you don't have any questions, then we'll go to the next one. So next we are going to discuss the type of contracts. What are the types of contracts available to us? We know the very famous or very well known contract type is written contracts, right? If it is a commercial contract, most of the time we have a written contract, right? For example, we take a lending of money, right? We say we go to a bank and we obtain a loan, or we take a credit card. So in a situation like that, you know that you have to fill and sign papers. So that what are you doing by signing papers and filling and signing papers? So that you entering into a written contract. So we'll take another example. You take a lease facility for a vehicle from a leasing company. So then you get a big document with several pages, and you are asked to sign certain places. Those places you have to sign. Then two witnesses sign. Then the company from the company side, their representative sign. So what is that document? That is a written contract. So the first type is a common or well-known type is a written contract. Then the second contract type is verbal contract. Verbal means by words, bhashika, right? So verbal contracts also there. So verbal contracts, that parties, they don't sign any document. Verbally, they enter into a contract. Verbally means that one party make an offer, the other party accept it, right? Nothing in writing, fully verbal word only. So that is number two. Number three, implied contract. Before that, remember there are some contracts. Part of the contract is verbal and part of the contracts are in writing. So there can be a contract like that, verbal, written and verbal, right? Certain terms and conditions you verbally agree, and then thereafter you put into the contract. So written contracts, verbal contracts, written and verbal contracts, and the last one is implied contract. Implied contract means that it is not written and it is not verbal also. So you have not written anything and you have not verbally agreed also. But by conduct, there can be we can create a legally enforceable contract. Nothing in writing, not verbally agreed, but by acting, by doing certain activities, that we can create a contract that is called implied contract.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
The implied contracts, part are verbal, part are written, is it?
Implied contracts.
Yeah, both are there. Or there is no anything.
Right, good question. Right, there can be implied contract without anything in writing, without anything verbal. Right now, for example, I just give a simple example just to understand. Right, we say I have a business. Right, I have a business, and I have a business. We say helper. Right, I have a helper. So I say it's a proprietorship. I am the owner. I have a helper who is a servant. I pay him a salary, but he sometimes act as my agent. I have not given him a written authority, and I have not verbally informed him that you have authority to represent me and enter into a contract. But by conduct, he act as my agent. I have not mentioned him that I have not given written permission or agreement to him with him. I have accepted, or I have accepted that he is my agent. Now he representing me enter into several agreements with others, right? So nothing in writing, nothing verbal, that I have appointed him as my agent, but the contract is valid. There is a contract between us, which is implied contract by conduct. So there can be as you said, there can be an implied contract, partly written, but some part we have omitted, but it applies to the contract, written contracts as an implied contract. That is also there. And also there can be a verbal contract where the majority of the terms and conditions we have discussed and agreed, but certain part we have omitted, we have not discussed, we have not accepted or agreed. But that when we are performing the contract, certain terms and conditions, both parties, even though we have not discussed, we perform. So then what will happen? That terms and conditions and part of the contract as an implied contract will apply to the contract. So there can be verbal and implied contracts, and there can be written and verbal contracts also, and there can be a full implied contract also without any written part or without any verbal part. Are you okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So
Right.
if we are going through the implied contract, is
Yes.
there any disadvantages for the owner?
Disadvantages. Okay, right. So in that case, I will compare all three, then explain. Right, not only implied contracts. So okay, written contract. If we take a written contract, the advantage is we have a document. We have a comprehensive written document. If it is breached, you go to courts, you produce the contract, and it is very clear, black and white. You can say these conditions have been breached. So it's very clear, easy. So that is the advantage. We say it's a verbal contract. If it is a verbal contract, nothing in writing, fully 100% verbal contract, the terms and conditions agreed between the parties, we have to prove in courts by evidence. So I have to bring evidence. You have to bring the evidence, the people who have heard this, people who knows this contract. So we have to bring them, and we have to establish the contract if it is breached. So terms and conditions that you have to prove, because it is not written in anywhere, it's verbal, fully verbal. So then you have to prove. The implied contract, again, the disadvantage is if it is an implied contract, is nothing in writing and nothing in verbal also. So therefore, you have to prove in courts by conduct. Between the parties, we had a contract like this. So that you have to prove by bringing evidence or bringing the witnesses and prove. Now, for example, we say my assistant or my assistant, business partner, and we say my conduct, we have entered into a agent and principal agreement, right? By conduct, nothing in writing. So the other people who have observed that our relationship as a principal and agent has to come and give evidence and establish the implied contract. So the disadvantage is it's very difficult to prove. So that is the disadvantages and advantages of written contract, verbal contract, and implied contract. So is that clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? So,
Excuse me, sir.
yes.
There's another question. Let's say
Yes.
in case of disease of a party who is involved in the contract, what will happen to the contract?
Okay, right. We'll go to this one then, right? What will happen to a contract if a one part, we say it's a two-party contract, right? Then it is easy, right? We say A and B only. A and B enter into a contract. So then the parties, they have to perform the contract. So A has to perform the contract, B has to perform the contract. We'll take a simple example, right? Please take a marriage, right? Man and woman get married. One party die. We say husband, right? What will happen to the marriage? What will happen to the marriage? Can you answer?
It will be there.
Marriage comes to end. Marriage contract comes to end. So it is this one, by operation of law, so that party is no more, right? The contract comes to end, right? So the contract discharged if it is a one party contract. So if it is a several party contract, right? This we took this simple contract, no, marriage, right? Husband and wife, one party deceased, the contract comes to end. No more marriage contract. So obligation of the parties is over, right? So other party, the surviving party, has no obligation to provide any service or duty to the deceased person. The marriage is over. But we'll take a tripartite or multi-party contract. So in the multi-party contract, if one party is deceased or is a bankrupt or wound up, then the contract itself provide whether the contract can exist with regard to the others. If contract says if one party is deceased or one party is bankrupt or one party is insolvent, whether the contract is whether the contract comes to end, then the contract comes to end. If it is silent, then the parties, the court has to decide whether the contract can be survived without this party, deceased party. So basically it depends on the nature of the contract. If one party is deceased, that means the status of the party change. So under this number 4, discharge of contract by operation of law, one party's status, legal status change, then the contract comes to end. Example, a natural person, if we die, then the person is no more, the contract is over, it comes to end. Clear?
Yes, sir. Clear.
Right. Any other questions? Right. So then we'll go. Yes.
Excuse me, one more question. So in the case it's a group contract.
Okay.
So one person breached. So other people like to continue the same agreement and conditions. So in that case, courts allowed to do that too until they confirm.
So what is the contract you said? Sales of goods?
No. It's a group contract, any kind of.
Any
not
contract?
2 parties. Yeah, any kind of. Not 2 parties, more than 2 parties.
Yes, okay. Multi-party contract. Okay, right. So it, as I told you, it depends on the nature of the contract, right? We say parties enter into a contract. Multi-party contract, we say one party agreed to provide, we say cement, the other party provide bricks, other party provides sands, likewise, and they are building, their contract is to build the multi-story building. We say these are companies. So cement company, while the this contract is for a period of 10 years. This cement company, we say now they bankrupt and they close down. Now what is the situation? Because of that, are we going to terminate the entire project? So basically it won't happen. So that part is normally covered in the terms of the contract. the terms of the contract say, if one party is bankrupt or wind up or disease, what will happen to the contract? So it could say, so instead of that person, the other parties can choose another person and replace the deceased person or a bankrupt person or wound up person. So then you can continue the agreement among others. So right. So likewise, it depends on the case by case that you have to see whether the contract can be performed with by replacing a person or without replacing a person instead of the deceased person. So that is number one. Number two, if there is no solution provided in the contract, so what will happen? In a situation like that, you can go to courts and see whether can get an interpretation whether the court whether we can perform the contract. If somebody challenge, or otherwise you can continue with the contract if other parties are agreed. Clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Right. Okay, then we'll go to the next one. If you don't have any other questions. So next we are going to discuss about Ubrima fide contracts. Ubrima fide contract. This word is a Latin word that you have to remember, because this is relevant to the bankers and other professions or other businesses like insurance. In that case, for any contractual matter, this is very important. Ubrima fide means utmost good faith. Utmost good faith, of the utmost good faith. Not just good faith, utmost good faith, maximum good faith. Some contracts are there that when you are entering into the contract, you have to provide every information to the other party, right? There are contracts that when you are entering into the contract, you have to provide only the main important points, not all. You don't have to provide all information, but some important points that you have to mention or you have to discuss with the other party, right? And some the contracts you have to provide only limited information to the other party, main limited information, not every important point, but some limited but very crucial points that you have to discuss, right? So there are types of contracts, different types of contracts. The information that you have to provide in the contract is different. So Ubrima fide contract means that such contracts, the parties, they have to provide all important necessary information, material information or facts have to be provided. So then remember, it is essential that there is a complete and honest exchange of information of all material facts. This word all is very important. All material facts between the parties. Example, the contract in insurance contract. So in insurance contract, when you are getting an insurance policy, we say life insurance, right? You get a big application, right? You have to fill a lot of places that you have to take, your illnesses, your weak, whatever the treatment you took, the medicines that you took, surgeries, whatever, you have a skin disease, everything they ask. So whatever the information they have asked, that you have to provide. All information that you have to provide. We say that you have provided all the information requested in the application, but you have not provided one information, material information, that we say you have provided a wrong information, right? They have asked whether you have got the vaccination for COVID-19, right? You say you have only taken one vaccine, the second one you have not received, but you say yes, both. Now this is a misrepresentation. all other information that you have provided, correct, about your health, right, your heart, your lungs, and your skin, hair, everything that they have
Excuse
asked.
me, sir.
Yes.
As I think sir missed one slide, 11th slide.
Unilateral contracts, right? This one.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Sorry. Then I'll come to this one after discussing this one, right?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing that to my notice. Yes, I have missed it. I will come to that after discussing this one. Okay, thank you. Right. So the Ubrima fide contracts, that you have to provide all the information. If you have missed anything, so then the contract is not valid. The other party can challenge the contract. So therefore, when you are getting an insurance policy, remember it is a Ubrima fide contract. All material facts you have to provide, unless that you have provide all material information. What will happen if something happened to you? The insurance company will reject the claim. So therefore, remember it is Ubrima fide contract. Then the contracts relating to the title, selling land sale. So when we are purchasing a land, the seller has to provide all material information to the seller. So if he has failed to do that, the purchaser can sue the seller. So that is related, because it is related to the title of the land. Then contract to subscribe for shares in a company. So that you know that companies, they are offering shares to the public, right? They publish a document called prospectus. In the prospectus, they mention the company performance, their business growth. Likewise, they provided a lot of information. If the public will go through will they observe the prospectus of the company, then after they will decide whether they are going to purchase shares of this company. If the important material facts mentioned in the prospectus, if those are wrong or misleading, then the shareholders, the people who purchase the shares, can sue the company, because it's a Ubrima fide contract. Then contract of family arrangement, marriage arrangements. So this is about the proposal marriages, right? This is also considered as a Ubrima fide the contract. If it is a arranged marriage, so between the parties, they have to exchange all important material facts among them. So if you misrepresent certain material facts to the other party, so they can challenge the marriage. So therefore, remember, it's only about the marriage, family arranged marriages only. For the other marriages, like love marriages, it's not applied. But for this, remember, it's a Ubrima fide contract. Then the contract made between persons who have previously entered into the contract of suretyship and partnership. So if you have previously dealt with the person as a surety, that's mean a guarantor, or as a partner in a business, right? Then you have a obligation to disclose all material facts to the other party. Especially for the bankers, it is very important that surety or guaranteeship, right? If you have dealt with the guarantor previously, then it is a duty. Then for example, we say now we have granted the loan facility to a customer, and a guarantor has signed as a person has signed as a guarantor on behalf for the borrower. So now this customer has defaulted. So you are going to reschedule the facility. So then you need to get a new guarantee bond for the rescheduled bond. We say, so in a situation like that, the guarantee bond the guarantee agreement that you are going to enter is a Ubrima fide contract. So therefore, it is an obligation of the bank to inform the guarantor the material facts, all material facts between the parties. So therefore, you have to say, you have to inform the customer, or rather the guarantor, that he is signing for a reschedulement facility for the customer. Likewise, you have to material facts that you have to inform. You can't say that you are signing as a, you can't just represent, you only signing as a witness. So therefore, please don't worry, you sign. No, that is a misrepresentation. So therefore, the guarantor can challenge the guarantee later on. So therefore, it is the duty of the guarantor. So rather the bank. Then, if full disclosure of the fact is not made, the other party has a right to resign or withdraw from the contract and ask for damages. So remember, so they can resign from the guarantee. Not only that, they can ask damages also. So therefore, prima fide contracts are very, very important. The main point here is, if it is a prima fide contract, that we have to provide all material facts to the other party. So all material facts between the parties should be communicated. Then right, the next one, unilateral contracts that I think I missed. So this we are going to discuss now. Unilateral contracts. Unilateral contract. What is unilateral contract? Now, at the beginning, I said when we entering into a contract, when we are creating a contract, the first element is the agreement, right? Offer and acceptance. I said, to have an agreement, the minimum number of parties are 2. At least 2 people should be there. That is the offeror and the offeree. Right? There can be more than 2, but minimum is 2. Now, unilateral contracts is little bit different. So therefore, you have to be very carefully understand. Unilateral mean, we'll take the normal contract. In a normal contract, what we have to do, what we do to create an agreement, one party make offer, the other party accepting. Then offer and accept creates an agreement. Then other things, right? Other elements, then create a contract. So in a prima fide contract, in a unilateral contract, can be performed by express offer, stating that offer only can be accepted through performance. Here what will happen, one party makes the offer. When he makes the offer, he says, you have to accept by performing. Accept by performing. So that means, to accept the offer, the offeree has to perform a duty, perform an obligation, right? Then what? Then that type of contracts are called unilateral contract. Unilateral, that means that you don't have to say that I am accepting your offer, so now I am starting performing duty, right? You don't. The offer is not like that. Offer, you accept the offer by performing a duty, right? That is the difference. The offeror makes a promise in exchange of any act by another party. Now, I will explain with an example, then you will understand. We say like this. We say, I have a dog, right? I have a pet, a dog, right? So this dog I lost in the supermarket or somewhere. Now I am looking for the dog. You may have seen this, right? Then, so I can't find him. Then I will put a poster. I say, reward 100,000 rupees if someone find this dog to me. bring this dog to me, right? $100,000 rupees. So that's an offer, serious offer, right? 100,000. I have a serious intention, right? I have the intention to binding with a contract. Right now, this offer is an offer made to a world at large, not to a particular person, right? Not to a particular group of people, but to the world at large. Now, offer is there. How can a person accept it? Now, when you see this type of poster offer, do you write to the person and say that, okay, I will accept your offer. I will now looking for the dogs and I will bring the dog. So you don't write. So what do you do? So then you see, you start looking the dog. So when you are driving, you look at the way. When you see a dog, you see whether that is the dog, right? If that dog is there, then what do? You take the dog and give him a call, and you say that I found the dog. So you have now performed. You have performed your part. You have performed. You have not informed him that you have accepted the offer, but you have performed. So nature of this offer, to accept the offer, you have to perform. So therefore, this type of by performing, the contract is created. Now, for example, we say, now you found the dog and you take the dog to the owner, and when you bring the dog to me, I say, okay, thank you very much. This is my dog. I really appreciate your hard work. That's all. Then you ask, where's my money? I say, no, that is, I just put that. It's not serious. So therefore, just forget about the money. Anyway, nice to meet you and all. So then what is the situation? You can sue me. You can sue me. You can say that you entered into a unilateral contract. I have made the offer with a serious mind. I have put a reward, and then you say, I saw that I accepted by performing. So therefore, it's a unilateral contract. So I have the party has breached the contract. I perform my part, but the other party breached the contract, unilateral contract. So therefore, you are entitled to the reward. So court accept this type of unilateral contract, and court can order me to pay 100,000 reward to you. So that is called unilateral contracts. Okay, that's it. We finish a contract with this. So you have any questions up to now? So since we finished the contract law, there will be definitely there will be a question from contract law. 90% time it will be essay type question, which carries 20 marks, right? And also it's very easy to answer compared to other topics that we are going to discuss. It's very easy to answer, right? It could be a 20 marks full question, or sometimes it could be a part of a essay type question which carries 10 marks. So anyway, most of the time, I would say 90%, there is a chance that you get a question from contract law. If you see the history, the past papers history, every year there is a contract question, because the contract is the fundamental of the banking law, right? So next we are going to study or discuss banker-customer relationship. That is the next topic that we are going to discuss. Remember, every transaction in the banking field, you take you name any product, any facility, loan, housing loan, credit card, leasing, whatever, all are contracts. All are contracts, unless you are thorough with the fundamental law principles, contract law principles, you will not be able to perform your duty 100%. So therefore, the contract law is the foundation of lot of commercial transaction, including banking. So so with this I finish contract law, fundamentals law of contract law. So if you have any questions, you have time, another 5 minutes we have. If you have any
Yes.
question, yes.
So, is there any possibility to send the past papers at the beginning? Then we can do so once the this thing one subject is finished. If there are any questions, we can practice that.
Actually, because of this distance learning situation, I am not sure what is the procedure to get past papers. Do you have the contact numbers of the institution?
Yes, I will contact Mr. Kavindu then.
Yeah, please, because now the earlier when we have physical classes, of course, I advise the students to get past papers from the office, but now I can't say that because you can't travel. However, whether there is a possibility to send soft copies of the past papers, I'm not sure about that. You better to
No, sir. They said they give in free of charge, but I think they will wait until this the sessions finish. I don't know. Anyway, they said they will provide.
So
But
then in that case, I will also inform Kavindra. So better you speak to Kavindra. As you said, it is very good to do past papers. I mean, after finishing one topic, then you can select the questions and you have to do that. Exactly, that is the correct way. I advise you, right? You have to do past papers, at least 5 years past papers by yourself. Then only that you can, get ready yourself for the exam without answering past papers, without writing past papers. In that, you can't. Basically, you can't say that you are ready for the exam. So that's good. Please contact the office, and I also inform them that your requirement. Any other questions?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Can you explain about privity of contracts?
Privity.
Yes.
Okay. Right. That a good question. But it takes little time to explain. Right. I will simply explain this thing. This question has come previously, not recently, but
2019 September paper.
Is it there? Right. Okay. Privity of contract is like this, right? We say, I will give you an example and explain. Then you will understand it. We say myself. So okay, A and B enter into a contract. A and B enter into a contract. C is not a party to the contract. It's a two-party contract. A and B. And C is an outsider who is not a party to the contract. So now A and B, under the contract, they have to perform duties. A has to perform duties to B. B has to perform duties to A. If the contract is breached, we say the contract is breached by A, right? A breached the contract. If the contract is breached, you know that the other party can go to courts and ask remedies, right? The innocent party can go to courts and ask remedies. So who is the innocent party in this contract? It is B. So B has a right to go to courts and ask remedies. C is not a party to the contract. C is not a party to the contract. C is an outsider. So C has no right to get interfere and get file an action and ask remedies as per this contract, unless he is a party or beneficiary of the contract. So there's no privity between A, B, and C. C is a total outsider. So in simple word, other than the parties of the contract, any other person has no privity to the contract to ask any remedies in court of law if it is breached. Clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. The time is now, I think, past. So we finish the contract law. So as I said, and as you suggest, that you get past papers, you select contract law questions and try to answer the questions. First, you have to study the notes, and you have to answer the questions, past paper questions, without looking at the notes. Right? This is very important, right? Without looking at the notes, that you have to write your answers. Then you check your answer with the notes, right? Then you realize, you see what are the points that you have missed. Then again, after a while, after a period, after a couple of weeks, you try to answer the same question again without seeing the notes. So try to give a comprehensive answer for the questions. So likewise, you have to develop your writing skills. As I told you, the answering of legal paper or law paper is different. You have to discuss the principle, law principle, and you have to discuss the act statutes, relevant statutes for that particular question. And also, you have to discuss the cases that I have mentioned, and the judgment and the facts of the cases, if necessary, facts of the cases, and support your answer with those statutes and cases. So remember, so you have to remember those cases and also statute sections, and you have to write those in your answers. So it's not easy in the beginning, but when you develop your skill gradually, it won't be that much difficult, because very limited number of cases that I have given to you, and also very number of acts and sections that I give. Those are essential. That's why I have given. So thank you very much. We'll meet on Saturday, 1 p.m. So we are going to start banker-customer relationship. I have already shared 2 presentations. First one, the banker, who is a banker-customer relationship, and the second one, the duties and responsibilities of the banker. Those 2 that we are going to discuss next week. Thank you very much.